starting with the big one though, man, like total current events we're talking about is the in the White House. Just a couple of days ago, man, they you see the correspondents dinner and Dana White sitting there like a freaking psycho. They're like, get down, and he's standing up
Yeah.
like this is the coolest thing ever, man. So when stuff like that happens, is there like a text that goes out like all hands on deck? Like how do those big things affect like the chain across the board? Because I'm sure there's like elevated senses of things that like you guys have to take certain restrictions or protocols when something like that happens.
Sure. I mean, of course, we're always in a heightened condition anytime we're working doing protection, right? So, like, and I even talk about this when I talk to folks about just personal safety and awareness is right. You want to live in, condition green would be like both earbuds in, face buried in your phone, completely oblivious to what's going on. We never want to be outside of our, probably our home in that condition. We want to live in condition yellow, which is calm but aware, right? And so when you're working, it goes from calm but aware to obviously ratchet it up to an imminent threat. And of course, we have an alert system, so the entire agency is alerted as to what's going on, and obviously protocols are then shifted into a more kinetic and aggressive posture, across the agency. Until that threat has been either neutralized or apprehended, right? Which is what you saw Saturday night.
So it's interesting to watch because the videos you see, they tell everybody like, "Hey, get down," when you can kind of see some stuff happening. And with the world today, those are things that in the past you wouldn't have been able to see. And I'm always looking for people's reactions, like how do they react in a like a panic situation like that? And you can see like the majority of people, they were like, "Get down." And as we just talked about, Dana White's like, "I'm standing up." But from like I guess a herd mentality, is a guy like Dana White, not to shit on Dana White, but somebody like that's going, "I'm going to do something different." Now, if you guys are trying to protect the president or look for the shooter, I feel like that's one more person now that you have to like take your attention and be like, "Dude, I told you to get that." Like, so if somebody does find themselves in a situation like that, is it better? Because I feel like now you're making the people's job harder that's trying to really find the threat because you're not following the directions that they're giving you.
Yeah, sure. So, of course, anytime in any active situation, your best bet for your safety is to comply with the lawful orders of a law enforcement agent, whether it's a federal agent, a local police officer. Right there, we're trained not only in dealing with these threats, but also in crowd management, right, and protecting the people at the venue. So it's always in, I'm not going to tell Mr. White what he should and shouldn't do, but it's always in the best interest of you for your own safety, right, is to comply with the orders. Because one, right, if you're non-compliant, that officer or agent can assume maybe you're part of the problem, right? Number two, if they don't think you're part of the problem, you could be in between the problem and them, right? Which could be harmful to you, right? Or harmful to the officer, because now he's trying to preserve your safety and not engaging the threat as appropriately as he should. And now more people are going to get hurt, right? Or potentially get hurt. So, we're trained in those tactics. I know local and state police officers in any active shooter or active situation are trained in those tactics on how to give verbal commands to the general public, to the people that are involved in the situation, right? And think about it, it's just kind of basic common sense is, if you're screaming at everybody to get down and there's one person who isn't, and you're not sure what's going on, it's like, again, Mr. White's a very recognizable figure, probably safe to assume he's not the threat, right? But who knows, maybe somebody that doesn't follow your show or watch the UFC and they don't know who he is and they're a member of law enforcement could present a problem. So, of course, always better to just comply with instructions of the officers for your safety. But I wasn't at that scene, so again, I don't know what Mr. White or any of the other guests saw. Maybe they didn't perceive a threat, or they weren't told to get down, or didn't hear. So who knows? So again, we always talk about these Monday morning quarterbacks, right? And they come out of the woodwork after an incident like this, and I always joke around. Everyone with a badge and gun is a tactical genius, right? Just like jujitsu, like anybody that's been on the mat for 3 weeks is a world champion, right? I know in the news, like I think Buchecha and Rodolfo Vieira are taking a little flack for their MMA performances, and it's like you're talking about guys that were the best of the best in our sport, legends, and people are criticizing their jiu-jitsu skills. So same thing. You get people. We even have some retired agents that have come out of the woodwork, and it's like, guys, when you were on the job, the threat, the operational tempo was so different. you don't even know what you're talking about, right? But they love to criticize and critique from the couch and from here. And so I don't like to do that. Even a bystander, whether he should have gotten down, should have gotten up. Look, I wasn't there. I don't know what was going through his head or their head. So, I know it makes better story and more fun to talk about when you are critical of these things. But and then there are some that are blatant, right? And even like you don't like to criticize them. You're like, well, that 100% was not right. But I think in some of these instances, when I taught in our academy, there's a court case that basically gives you your authority to do your job as a police officer. It's Graham versus Connor, right? And what it says is that after all the dust settles, and if there's an officer and he's going to be judged by a court, officer or agent, they say he must be judged based on the totality of the circumstances that he knew at the time, right? And cannot be judged using hindsight and 2020 vision legally, right? So when we all know this, right? Whether whether you've been a cop, a Secret Service agent, an FBI agent, a deputy U.S. Marshal, DEA, we're all taught to say the law is the law in the United States. So, it is a lot easier to go back in hindsight and say, well, you should have done this and should have done that. But that information wasn't what the officer saw, because you have to make split-second decisions, right? And the court recognizes this. Sure, if we all had time to hit pause in a kinetic, high-threat environment and hit pause, walk around the venue, look at everything, take in all the different camera angles, and then take 20, 30, 40, 50 a week, 2 weeks of time to then say, yeah, what I would have done is X, Y, and Z. That would be love. I'd love to live my life like that, Nick. We'd be having this discussion from my yacht in the Mediterranean because I'd be rich, right? So we'd all love to have that luxury, but unfortunately in law enforcement and just like on the mats, you don't have the ability to do that. So you need to make split-second decisions based on the information you have at the time, which, is someone sprinting at full speed towards, our outermost security checkpoint.